A very good morning to all of you students. How are you doing today? Wishing you all a very happy Republic Day. So students, now we will focus on an important chapter in biology, that is the cell. So we see at near our environment all the flowers, fruits, plants, living beings, insects, human beings, animals. So what are all these composed of? If you see, everything is a living organisms, right? So if you see this living organisms, they are all composed of life. So this life, how does it come from? They come from a single tiny unit called as the cell. So cell, the cell, if you see, okay, then you will get a doubt on your mind. Oh, how many cells do human beings have? Yes, we are composed of many cells in nature. So we have trillions of cells in our body, right? But there are also other small, minute, tiny organisms which are single celled in nature. You know how the coronavirus has affected the humanity, right? It is just single celled in nature, but still it has a life. When it attacks the human body, it takeovers the human body's function and immunity, and it develops itself. So everything is composed of a functional and structural unit of life. So everything has a life in it. This form is called as the cell. So you might be worrying, so how to understand the cell? So we have, if you take our human body itself, we have the brain cells, we have the cells in our eyes, we have the cells in our hands, we have cells in different parts of the body which performs different functions, right? So our hand cells in the hand help us to do the activity. The brain cells help us to think. What are they called? They are called as nerve cells, because they communicate each other throughout the length and breadth of the body, right? We are okay. Let us not get diverted too much into the types of cells. First we will come to know everything has a history, right children? So once we need to understand something, we need to go back to the history of how this cell has been originated, who discovered it, who was the person, who was the champion, who was the scientist who had that inquisitive thought. So when Anton von Leeuwenhoek, if you have heard the name, who invented the microscope, right? Why is the microscope used? Yes, everybody would have seen, but as biologists, we have to be more curious about it. So we see small, tiny living things in a magnifying image in a microscope. So he observed Anton von Leeuwenhoek. So he observed cork cells contain some small compartments like structure. So in the Latin, these small cells compartments are termed as cells. So that is why the cell, the name cell originated for living form or the small compartment in nature. So he started in 1838, like 1638. Next, going further, Robert Brown, what he did, he observed something very curious in nature, that is the nucleus inside the cell. And this nucleus gives the functional unit for a cell to perform. So based on this, the cell theory originated. How did the cell theory originated? There were two pioneers in 1838, M.J. Schleiden and one more scientist, Robert Hooke. So these two people championed in telling that all the living organisms are made up of structural and functional unit of life called as cells. These cells originate from the pre-existing cells. So these cells have a life in function. So this formed the basis of the cell theory. So based on this theory, now we will come to understand what this cell comprises of. This cell comprises of, if you know, If you think as a vast sky and the moon is sitting in the dark night sky with stars in between, so you will focus, yes, the cell is composed of a bigger protoplasm in nature. This protoplasm gives the life forming substance to the cell. So if you see the full sky completely with clouds, so that is the protoplasm, and the centrally placed moon is, you can take it as the nucleus. So every cell has a distinct nucleus, a cytoplasm in nature, and a DNA in it. So this forms the structural unit of the cell. So based on these three units, we have going further to distinguish between, there are two types of cells. That is, if you see bacteria, viruses, they are all called as prokaryotic cells. And other complex organisms, birds, animals, human beings, they are composed of eukaryotic cells. So in the next coming class, we will revise this and take it further to understand what is the difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Children, when you go home, just think about it. Single cell, prokaryotic, and eukaryotic, it is multicells. Prokaryotic, they have a nucleus which is not distinct, but eukaryotic cells, they have a distinct nucleus and a cytoplasm in it and a plasma membrane in it. I'll come back and catch you when you brief about the cell theory and about the invention, and next class we will go in detail. All the best, take care, have a good day.